every time I hear that. It's so odd. So thank you to everyone that is signed up and participating this evening. I am Tanya Williamson. I am the Outreach Volunteer Coordinator for the Conservation Land Bank, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us this evening. It's so dark out. I'm still not quite used to the time change. Our intention is to host these meetings biannually. I think I'm getting that right. We had a spring community conversation, which was island specific. So we held 3 in April. And this is our first countywide, where we have all of our commissioners online, and we have some staff as well. Thank you, staff, for joining us tonight as well. The goal is to host every year, and I'm not sure in the future if it'll be virtual or if it'll be in person, but we would like to keep these town hall meetings going and be able to communicate. So for those that may or may not know the commissioners, I'm going to go ahead and read them off alphabetically. And if you could just give a wave, that would be great. That way people can find you on their screens. I know they tend to change, but hopefully that'll work. So I'm going to get my cheat sheet so I don't forget anybody. It doesn't look like we have Miles on yet. So I'll skip over. Miles Becker is one of our, I don't know if I can call him Lopez, District 3, Position 3. I'm sorry, I don't have you all memorized, Commissioner. And then Krista Campbell. Down there. She's muted. Let's see, David Myland. Sandy Friel. Jim Skove. He's easy to find. He's got the Aurora. Doug Strandberg. And Brian Weiss.
Hello.
Thanks. And then I see staff. So if I'm going to go ahead and just acknowledge so that people can find you on the screens too. For San Juan Island, we have Doug McCutcheon. And thank you. Amanda Widow from Lopez. And somewhere, and there's Peter, he's up in my left-hand corner there from Orcas. So, and then Erin Halcomb is our stewardship coordinator. She makes her rounds through the county. And then Aaron Rock, which on my screen is at the bottom, but he's our fiscal clerk. And I think you'll hear from Lincoln shortly. We'll give the presentation. And the presentation tonight, the topic is how does the land bank choose properties? And Lincoln's put together a slideshow, PowerPoint as excuse me, as an overview. And then after we're through with the presentation, we'll open it up to questions. What we'd like to do is start with questions that are specific to tonight's topic. And then once everyone has had a chance to ask their questions, we'll move on to a general Q&A. We have, I think, plenty of time. We've booked it out to 7:30. So I think we should be able to hit everybody's questions or comments. Initially, the plan was, and if you would bear with me for a second, I'll share my screen so that you can see right here. Oops, there we go. We're in a webinar format, which is different than our typical monthly meetings, which is a Zoom meeting format. So right now, I have chat disabled, mostly so I don't get confused. And the goal is to have everyone type a question into the Q&A. So there's a spot right down here. And then if you click on that, this should prompt and you can type into there. And then I can read it aloud to the commissioners. But if timing, I'll go ahead and stop sharing, goes well, we'd like it to be more of a conversation. So at the bottom of your screen, there's also a raise hand icon. And if you click on that, I can keep track and call on folks as you raise your hand, and then we can have more of a conversation. We won't be able to see you, but we will be able to hear you. So if people are open to that, we can try that as well. So I'll give it to Lincoln to take over with the presentation, and then after that, we'll go into Q&A. I think I hit everything.
Thanks, Tanya. So I am Lincoln Borman. I'm the director of the Conservation Land Bank. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, so here we are. Yes, dark. The San Juan County Conservation Land Bank, some of you will note the word conservation in there, which we are incorporating, or rather reincorporating into the name. The original name was the Citizens Conservation Land Bank, and then it got contracted to Land Bank. Now we're trying to bring back conservation, I think mostly because we're looking to make sure everyone kind of understands what we're all about. And there are a lot of people coming from other parts of the country where land banks don't do what we do. They do other kinds of things. We do conservation, and we're not really a bank, but we are the county's conservation arm. And what I'm going to talk to you now is about how we, meaning the commission, goes about establishing acquisition priorities. Our process depends a lot on planning, honestly. We do a lot of work, a lot of assessments and plans. The original one was the county's open space and conservation plan done back in 1990. That was an original document which really focused on a rural character and preserving views from public places. Along the way, we've done several parks, trails, and natural areas plans. We do those every 6 years in conjunction with county parks and public works, looking at trails, parks, and natural areas. The Habitat Conservation Plan we did some time ago and probably is due for an update, but a lot of that holds up very well. And also we do surveys. The Tourism and Visitor Management survey you see there was done in conjunction with a terrestrial managers group. That's the group of all of the conservation land managers in the county. So we take that and we couple it with our mission, which is broad, and we feed it into this matrix, which is a very useful tool for the commission to really figure out what are our most important priorities, what we can do, what we can't do. So in addition to the criteria and the mission, things like environmental value or scenic value, they are also looking at what the cost is and whether we've got potential partners or grants, things along those lines. And it's a very helpful way for us to figure out what projects should go forward. We certainly have a lot of potential projects and not all of them make it to the top. When we're doing open space conservation, and I showed this slide back in the spring, I'm sure you'll all remember it. There are a couple of things going on. First, we're looking at scale on the left-hand side of this slide. So that can be large landscapes where we're focusing on ecological value, for example, or connectivity, redirecting growth away from places which should remain more natural. And that's things like Turtleback Mountain or Katy Mountain on San Juan. We also look at specific features, iconic places, again, Turtleback, which fits into more than one category, or Deadman Bay on San Juan. Other things under that, under specific features, we do work on neighborhood open space. Driggs Park and Friday Harbor is a good example of that, as is East Sound Waterfront Park in East Sound on Orcas. And that's also another category, shoreline access, something that's particularly important on Orcas because it's hard to come by. We do two types of conservation. One, where we focus on private lands and do conservation easements where the property remains in private ownership. And we basically purchase the right to divide the property or develop the property so it remains. If it's a big farm, it will remain a big farm. And a lot of that is for working farms and forests. And what we get out of doing those conservation easements, in addition to helping to preserve farms, are views and rural character. We also own properties outright. We do that when public access might be an important component. Typically, you don't get that when you do a conservation easement. We also do outright ownership when we might want to do some more intensive management of ecological resources, for example. And we do purchase agricultural land and we turn that around and lease it back to farmers to help keep farming going in the community. I wanted to start really with this slide. This is kind of the counter slide to everything else you're going to see. But I think it's important for people to understand that we're limited in what we can do. And there has been a considerable amount of development that's happened in the county. So this is kind of the contrast slide. Everything you see in colors, and I apologize, they're different colors. I created this on Pol.is at different times and didn't quite match up those colors, but everything that's colored is basically something that's less appropriate for conservation projects because they're smaller lots. Also, there are a lot of vacant lots, parcels that can be subdivided. Rural clusters can happen in those areas. And so that's kind of what we're working around as we do conservation. And now I'm just going to come into the specific tools that we're using and how that helps us prioritize conservation efforts. So this is from our habitat conservation plan. And as you can see on the right-hand side, those green areas really are what you're going to focus on if you're interested in ecological integrity or preservation of species, larger contiguous natural areas, significant shoreline areas, things along those lines. And on the left-hand side, you'll see this slide. You're going to see that one over and over again through the next few slides. But there you can see the conservation lands that exist. It's a little bit out of date, but not too much. And more importantly, you can see the gaps. So everything within those red circles are areas which are significant, but there's a lot of conservation work yet to be done within them. That kind of feeds into something that's become more and more important to islanders and to everyone, really. The specter of climate change and really trying to conserve areas which are going to be more resistant to climate change over time. This comes out of a study done by the Nature Conservancy, where they looked at some of the criteria that are important in maintaining natural areas over time without them breaking down. So some of those factors will be things like contiguous natural area or contiguous forest, changes in topography, so you can preserve shoreline up to the top of a mountain and down the other side. So south-facing slopes, north-facing slopes. Those kinds of, that kind of diversity allows species to actually move with climate change. And this pixelated shot on the left here is another breakdown of the Nature Conservancy's approach to this. So the green areas are the more resilient areas. And then on the right-hand side, you can see places where we've got gaps. There are some significant gaps, particularly if you look at the area around Turtleback. Also, this area, northern San Juan, for example, or Lopez Hill and the surrounding area to Lopez Hill. So another factor that we consider. Salmon recovery is also really quite important to what we do. The county's preferred strategy or priority strategy for salmon recovery is to conserve undeveloped properties on the shoreline that have specific characteristics. So these will be areas where there are actually fish documented, where there are pocket beaches that will support or have documented forage fish that salmon need to survive. And those areas emerge here. So South Lopez, Southeastern Lopez, Northeastern San Juan, President Channel area, those are some of the places that are critical. And as you can see from this map, we definitely have some gaps there, so some work to do. We also look at resource lands. So these are working farms forests, and we do try and preserve those working landscapes. And as you can see, these are spread out all around the county, but in particular spots. The brown here is going to be the agricultural areas, and the greener are forest areas. And again, gaps. So the Center Valley and Lopez emerges as a gap in protecting working lands. Crow Valley, where we've done quite a lot of work, still has some way to go. And on San Juan, we've got these forested areas on the northern part of the island, and also San Juan Valley, where we have made some great progress, but still there's more to be done. And last, we think about public access quite a bit. So in this slide, what you're seeing is the yellow, that is existing public access points to conserved areas generally. But the blue is proposed. That has not come to pass yet. It may be in a protected area, which we're planning on opening. More likely, it's in an area where we think we have an opportunity to conserve, but have not actually been able to do that at this point. So it's yet another factor that we're looking at. All that comes together in this somewhat bewildering overall map of the county. And here what you're looking at is the green, the solid green areas are in conservation ownership. Not just the land bank, certainly, but all the other conservation organizations like the National Park, the National Monument, the Sunland Preservation Trust, etc. The magenta areas, or pink, whatever that color is, those are conservation easements. And so that's what we've basically managed to accomplish. And what we are looking at, though, as priority areas are the areas in between. So there'll be areas that are demarcated in this green color, but you can still see them, so they remain unprotected. And I'm going to go through this island by island and talk also about some of our upcoming projects, or some of our current projects. So on Orcas, priority areas that we're looking at, you can see the big priority areas like around Turtleback. We don't have any projects going there at present, but we know this is a critical piece of our landscape. We did in 2020 manage to protect this additional area of Turtleback. But these are some projects that are ongoing, and I'm going to focus on one of them, which is our most active one up here on the north shore of Orcas. This is the Glenwood Inn property, or the McPeak property. It's a defunct inn in an estate situation, and we're really working on this one quite hard together with the Preservation Trust. It's going to take some doing. It's a significant property, 58 acres with a lot of shoreline, with a third of a mile of waterfront and established access. This is high bank shoreline, but you can see they put in a road down here at some point. So this provides a great access point to this entire shoreline, including the tidelands here, which work their way across this private property to Point Doty. When you combine these, what you're looking at, because there's so little access to public shoreline and accessible shoreline, where you can actually get to the water's edge on Orcas. This project has the potential to double the amount of shoreline access that exists on the island. It's a high priority salmon recovery area also, but will we get it? It's going to be a tough one. We've made an offer, but since it's in an estate situation, it's going to be listed, and we don't know whether we'll be able to compete with private buyers or not. But it's a super high priority for us, so we'll be working on it. That's just a shot of the shoreline looking toward the northwest. That's Saturna Island in the background, and one with Point Doty in the background here. Some amazing geological features on this property as well. And that's just a closer shot of Point Doty from the Point Doty property. Moving on to San Juan, some of the things we've been able to accomplish here are in red. So up in the center part of the island, and also Beaverton Marsh over to the right there. And I'm going to focus on two current projects. Both of these are owned by a couple, Steve and Sarah Hauschka. The first one is adjacent to Mount Grant, and it's a 40-acre property, and you can see it fits very neatly between Mount Grant here and then the town's watershed property of Trout Lake. So it's really kind of a critical one for us as a buffer, if nothing else. But it does have access via a public road and some great, some forest areas on there. It does have a bit of infrastructure, which we're hoping will actually help us when we've got to bring out conservation crews to do work. We're thinking this might be a really good site for that as well. So this one, the purchase price is $800,000. It's spread over a 4-year period, so the owners are financing it for us. And really a pretty exceptional piece of property. The next one is adjacent to our Katy Mountain Preserve. So you can see the Katy Mountain Preserve outlined here. This is the English camp unit of the historical park. This piece actually takes us all the way to the top of Katy Mountain. It has a lot of other things going for it, mature firs, Gary oaks, some great herbaceous or rocky bald areas, and some spectacular views on it. Same price as the other one for this one, and just some closer shots of it so you can see how it sits in the context. Our access for Katy Mountain Preserve will come off of Three Corner Lake Road. It's not yet open, but that's our plan. The access will come from here going up. Hopefully, and I think we're going to be successful in purchasing this property, but also going over to the west through Roche Harbor property to Mitchell Hill, and those trails already exist. So we'll be working on trying to get this preserve open in the next couple of years. The contours just tell the story. So our existing holdings, we've got some wetland areas and north-facing forest coming up here all the way to the top, which is the Hauschka property, and then the front side of it, which is more where you find Gary oak habitat. And just a closer aerial with a few photos. So Gary Oaks, yes, spectacular views. I think in the middle, Doug McCutcheon is trying to fly. I'm not sure how that went, but he's here, so I guess it went pretty well. Just a spectacular spot. Lopez. So what we've done, we've actually made quite a bit of progress in Lopez over the last few years, doing things like in addition to Lopez Hill, in partnership with the Preservation Trust, also with the Lopez Community Land Trust, which has taken this spot and really they're reserving it for farm use, for farmsteads, which will be a really great contribution to the community. conservation easement over the Double R Bar Ranch, the Ritchie property here, and this property in Richardson Marsh. The overall marsh is here. And this is the one that I want to focus on now that is currently in play. That's the Higgins property. It's the last remaining unprotected piece of property on Watmow Bay. And as you can see, it's got quite a bit of shoreline, both on the bay and wrapping around to the Rosario Strait. It's got some amazing features, those pocket beaches. It's a high priority for salmon recovery. You can see this bull kelp bed here. We have documented fish in this area. It also has a lot of historical and cultural relevance, with the oldest house on Lopez being here, and some significant, there's been significant use by Coast Salish for probably thousands of years on this site as well. So it's kind of where cultures have come together and clashed. We have an agreement to purchase this property for $2.54 million. And our plan is to go through with that and then resell it ultimately to the Bureau of Land Management to be part of the national monument. So we're in process in doing this one. It's been a long time coming, but it's actually coming to fruition. And just some shots of the property, one of the pocket beaches to the right there, the house in the upper left, and then looking back toward Chadwick Hill and Watmow Bay, you can see the beach here. So just a property that's hard to oversell, quite honestly. It's a phenomenal thing. And what we've accomplished is my last slide, and then we'll go to questions. That we've purchased 49 or gotten a donation. We do accept donations of property. That's always welcome. We've got 49 conservation easements on 7 islands, and we have 38 preserves, 29 of which are open to the public. And with that, I will stop sharing and we'll move on to the question part of the program. Tell us what to do now, Tanya.
First is unmute. So traditionally, it was going to hope that if people had questions, we would ask that you would type them in that Q&A box and it would pop up for me. I would read it aloud. If you wanted to address it to someone specifically, if you could include their name, like Tanya, what's your favorite preserve? We could do that. But if folks are comfortable, if you want to raise your hand and ask verbally, you know, I can unmute you and then the commissioners and staff would be able to hear your question. Some people don't like to ask, some people prefer to type. So trying to be flexible here and give people an opportunity to do what is easiest or what they're most comfortable with. So if you raise your hand, I'm happy to, I think it's open it up, unmute you, or if you type it into the Q&A, I'm happy to ask it out loud. So we do have one, typed one. Janet asks about resale of Higgins to the BLM. The resource management plans have several aspects that are opposed locally. Dispersed camping and target practice with high-powered firearms. How would this be addressed?
Well, that's a great question. And I'm sure we have some other folks on this call tonight who are part of the Monument Advisory Committee. The monument plan has not been finalized, so I'm not envisioning that we're going to see those things, particularly on this part of the property. I think that's not really in alignment with the reason the monument was created, quite honestly. So we'll be talking as we go forward with this extensively with the BLM, and we'll do whatever we can to make sure that the property is treated the way it should be treated, that we could preserve those historic and cultural resources and the ecological resources on it. But I'm happy to talk about that further if you have more questions.
Let's see. How do you accomplish fair distribution of acquisition funding between the islands?
Good question.
I'm sure
Would like
there's a
to feel-
commissioner who wants to answer that question.
I'll answer that. What I would say about that is, I think what we look at generally, different organizations, not just the land bank, but anybody that's receiving revenue from the island activity. Most of the business happens on San Juan and Orcas. Lopez is a little quieter and sleepier. So it somewhere roughs out, I think it's 30, let's say 40% San Juan, 38% Orcas, and somewhere in the teens for Lopez in terms of what we generate in REIT revenue. So if you were to distribute that money, you could distribute that money based on those percentages. But what, in my couple of turns on the Land Bank Commission so far, what I've seen is that we look at each of the islands, the commissioners advocate for different properties on their particular island, but as the one that usually sits at the little kids table, I think Lopez has been well taken care of by the land bank, and we prioritize properties with a much broader outlook than just looking at which island raises the most money. So it's a matter of priorities and community response and the environmental aspects, just as Lincoln's outlined. A lot goes into it, but it doesn't come down to who earns the most money.
Anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll add to that, Tanya. I think the Higgins property on Lopez is a perfect example where the commissioners unanimously made it a top priority, even though Lopez does not contribute quite as much money. It's a property that is of value to everybody in the San Juan Islands. And I think it's a very good example of how we approach things, even though we do keep in mind the way that money is contributed to the Conservation Fund. We're perfectly willing to look at projects like the Higgins project and make that an absolutely top priority.
All right, so we have a couple more questions in the Q&A. The next is in regards to Higgins. How important is it to the land bank that public access be allowed? Can the land bank put a deed restriction on the transfer to BLM? Will the land bank discuss with the public where on the spectrum of no public access used for tribal scientific use to combination of public access and protection for tribal scientific use? Did that make sense as I read that?
Yeah, I mean, we'll be looking at everything really. I do think that if we're going to end up using land bank funds for this property, then public access is going to be important. However, we're certainly going to have to find a way to protect the cultural. This is a very rich cultural resources site, and those elements need to be protected, whether it's by restricting, where people may be able to go on the property or in some other way. And I think if we go through with a resale to the Bureau of Land Management, they'll be going through that process as well, and engaging with all the different stakeholders to make sure we come up with something that's balanced. There's a lot of work to be done on it, really.
Sandy?
Yeah. So I just wanted to add that although it's our plan to resell the property in a couple of years for management purposes, since the BLM has property there, I feel that if we're not comfortable with what the outcome would be in terms of what restrictions there could be, then we can retain it. We have that option. There hasn't been a commitment made, I don't believe, right, Lincoln?
Nope.
So I think it's important to us, the ultimate outcome. And if we don't feel that the certain values will be protected, then we have the option of keeping it as well.
Great, thanks. Next question. Is there any chance that you might take over the county's road end properties, the ones that haven't been developed, in order to make those water accesses known and available to folks on foot?
Well, road ends inspire a lot of debate in the community, that's for sure. I think that, you know, we've looked at certain road end properties, and it really, given the fact that it's in public ownership and that Public Works has developed some of those road ends and created parking, that's probably where it should stay. If a road end is adjacent to a natural area and there's a potential for a larger conservation, then that's something that we definitely want to look at. But I would say that just straight public access, you know, particularly when you're talking about a road end where it may be only 40 feet wide at most, or something along those lines, it's more of a public works or parks project. But I would love to hear what commissioners have to say about that.
I agree with that too. The county already holds the right of way and the ability to add parking. And I think that if, especially on Orcas with the limited access, that people should write letters to the council person and kind of press for those kind of projects to be included in a public works budget. But providing just a parking area to access an existing public area isn't within our scope.
Does anyone else want to weigh in on that one? Scanning. It was noted or asked that Sandy noted that the BLM manages property adjacent to Higgins. And it should be pointed out that the land bank also manages adjacent property. It was a comment that came through. And let's see, the next question. Is the land bank not considering parcels that are subdivided? There are confused as there are many subdivided parcels which are undeveloped and have great conservation potential. So I guess the question is, do we consider parcels that are subdivided? That's the land bank.
Well, I'll make a comment there in the fact that Mount Grant was already divided into what was it, 12 lots, and you know, that was something we acquired, and I don't think that's not a hindrance to us. I don't think. Maybe somebody wants to add to that.
Yeah, it really depends on the context. So something like Mount Grant, where there were 12 lots, but together, you know, you're talking about a significant area of 140 acres. That's definitely, and really the situation there was that the development was failing. They tried to market it for a year and a half, and the opportunity became available. So we jumped in, and that's an amazing resource for the community. So it's not so much whether properties have been subdivided as whether what you've got or what you can put together is something that's significant. So it's about the size of the parcels and about the ecolot or the conservation values that are present on those properties.
Great. Before we move on to general questions, do participants have any other questions specific to how the land bank chooses properties? Or I'm keeping my eye out for raised hands as well as in the Q&A.
Well, I would add that we don't always, it's not always us choosing a property. It's sometimes the property chooses us, and actually often that's the case. As Lincoln stated in his presentation, that, you know, there are areas of high conservation value within the county, and certainly if something becomes available, we will delve into it. But a lot of times we're approached by the seller, by the landowner.
I would add this too, to what Jim just said, that it's not only the landowners or sellers who approach us, but it's any member of the public, any of you in our audience tonight who might know of a property that would be good for acquisition for public purposes. You can all do the part, and you know, we can't be aware of everything. So we always welcome public input on that.
All right. So I have a question that had been sent in and kind of fits right after, I'd say, the properties. It's a little long. It has some parts, so bear with me as I read it. Part 1, in the county code 2.120 under purpose part C, it reads, in order to maintain private ownership and maximize the use of available funds, the Land Bank Commission shall first consider conservation easements or other non-fee interests as the method to achieve the purposes of the proposed acquisition. So here is the question to the first part, I believe. At recent land bank meetings, there has been talk about an inability to enforce the conservation easements and move away from them. This seems like a move contrary to your purpose. Could you explain, please? So that's the first part, and then I can move on to the second one so you can digest that.
Well, I'll take a shot at it. First of all, we still do conservation easements. It's definitely something we're interested in continuing to do. Regarding the enforcement question, I think actually we've done quite well with our conservation easement properties. There have been a few issues with enforcement of easements and violation of easements. That's something that's just going to happen. But overall, we've been quite fortunate. So the land bank will continue to look at conservation easements. They're just not always possible. I mean, first of all, landowners we've had plenty of times where we've started down the road and a landowner decides that, look, they just don't like this arrangement where basically we're becoming a partner with them on their land, and they'd rather sell the property outright. It's just a cleaner thing for them to do. And, you know, it's just, we do what we can. If we're interested in having public access to properties, then conservation easements are less relevant. But, you know, all of this happens on a case-by-case basis, and conservation easements are still very much in the mix.
And I'll add that when typically if a conservation easement is going to get challenged, it's typically by a secondary or tertiary owner of the property that has come after the original owner had the conservation easement put on their property. And certainly there is, you know, the full disclosure necessity with any real estate agent to make sure that any buyer knows that there is this conservation easement, and to provide all that information to the buyer, the new buyer. I'm not sure what the history is so far yet of challenges nationwide in conservation easements, but I know there are insurance products that have been created to defend conservation easements. So it's something that's happening not just here, it's something that's happening all over the country with conservation easements and conservation organizations. And I think it's just an evolving process. And as Lincoln said, it's a case by case basis. Everyone is a little different.
I'll add to what Jim has to say. Some years ago, I attended a seminar on enforcement of conservation easements, and it is a kind of a nationwide issue. And I do think a lot of times it is a subsequent owner that creates the problem. And I think it's something that we have considered in our in decisions as to whether or not to do a conservation easement or pursue the acquisition of property. And I do think that overall with our conservation easements, we've had very few enforcement problems as compared to what's been going on nationwide.
The other thing would be the cost benefit. Lincoln, can you mention?
Yeah, you know,
costs.
when the land bank was set up, the idea was to really try and do conservation easements because you can purchase one that's for less than purchasing a property outright, and you don't have to manage it. But the reality is, first of all, it depends on the easement. So you might be paying up to 75% of the value of the property outright for a conservation easement. And you might not get, you typically won't get public access, even if you're paying that high amount for a piece of property. So that's one thing. And yeah, you not having to manage it is definitely a bonus, but you are going to have to work with those landowners year after year, and you're going to have to work with them from landowner to landowner. And as Jim says, you know, when the third owner gets a hold of a property, they may have very different ideas about how that easement should be treated than the initial person who you might have negotiated the easement with. So that can create some significant issues down the road.
I would say too that this is a situation that has changed over time, not just for the land bank, but for land trusts, land banks, conservation organizations nationally. Conservation easements have over time become more expensive in relation to outright land acquisition. I think Lincoln alluded to this. It's just more, they're more expensive to acquire and they're more expensive to manage. So given the added benefit of public access, if one chooses, when we acquire, that just makes more sense in a lot of cases. It's, if you will, it's more bang for the buck.
And if I can add something, I think this may be something that we will need to address going forward, is to set up some sort of a meeting with a new owner, you know, a secondary or a tertiary owner of a property with a conservation easement on it, so that we can have some kind of dialogue with them as to, you know, what the original reasoning was, what the parameters of the conservation easement are, and you know, how we can work together. There have been just a handful of instances where there have been owners subsequent owners that have been in, I don't know whether we want to call it denial or have just decided to ignore, and those things are going to happen, but I think they're going to be few and far between. For the most part, if somebody is fully, if a new owner is fully informed as to what the conservation easement is all about and why it's on that property in perpetuity, communication is the key, and maybe that's something we need to work on a little bit more going forward.
Well, I'd say it's rare that a property changes hands that with a conservation easement on it that we don't know about before the transaction actually occurs. So realtors call us, they want to set up meetings with the prospective buyer to talk to us about what the conservation easement means. That's routine, pretty much. Some we have, it's possible for some to slip by, but that generally is not what's going on.
I think one thing.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to mention that something that has happened in the past, and hopefully we've fixed it for the future, is that even though we know when a property, generally know when a property sells, what we aren't made aware of is when someone submits for development plans. And what has happened is that community development has approved plans without notifying. They can see on the legal description that it's subject to a conservation easement. So we did try to circumvent that and make that a procedure. I don't know if it's being followed, but especially with the changes in the department, it'd be good to follow up on.
The only thing I was going to add was that just in the numbers that Lincoln has given us also tonight, that we hold, did you say 49 conservation easements and 38 that we own ourselves? So we still have more conservation easements than ones that we have purchased. And what part of that original comment was, whether getting the most bang for your buck or being economical or fiscally responsible, whatever. So it's less expensive to buy conservation easements. And what I would say to that is that we pull in a lot. I don't have the figures in front of me, but I'm always astounded at how much money Lincoln is able to identify and secure to help offset the cost of any particular project. The land bank staff are very well versed with where federal dollars and state dollars exist, and they get them. That's where the partnership portion of that acquisition matrix is so important. We partner with a lot of institutions where we end up not paying very much, or we pay a reasonable share, but more of it's being paid by other agencies. So when we do acquire properties for conservation easement or acquisition, I think the staff has done a remarkable job in getting more money from outside places. I think we are being very fiscally responsible in that way.
That was great. I know there's a second part to that question, but I do have someone who'd had their hand up for quite a while. And so Steve Wolvie, did you get your, do you still have a question, I guess? And if you do, please ask.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you. First, you guys are wonderful. And this land bank idea is just, it's just an amazing thing. And I'm glad to live here, and I'm glad to see you doing so well with so many purchases of properties. And I too agree, conservation easements are the most wonderful thing. I also see that Jim Skoog seems to be sitting in my old cabin site on the Yukon River there right now, and I love to see that. But, I guess what I would ask is a very broad question, and I know you won't want to spend much time on it probably, but it's a question about the future with climate change ramifications. And so I I love the fact that you're able to parlay so much REIT money for properties and conservation easements. I think hiking is a wonderful thing. I think trails are a wonderful thing. Beachfront is a wonderful thing. But when it comes down to it, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the future, we're going to need food to eat. We're going to need property to have solar arrays. We're going to need to create our own energy. And I wonder if anybody wants to kind of speak to how we might work in that direction with land bank acquisitions as the new comp plan is finalized over the next year or more. And we hopefully take some serious looks at adaptation to what is coming. I think, thank you. Anyway, I very much appreciate what you guys are doing. It's a wonderful thing, but I have some worries about the future that I hope to see addressed at the county level in various ways, you know, in the near future.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks,
Jim, and what I'd like to say is that I know that we, as a commission and an organization, made a decision a number of years ago to filter every decision we make essentially through the lens of climate change. And so, you know, we as an organization have made that commitment. What form that takes is going to be a case-by-case basis. It's also going to, I think, be affected by whether it's state, county, state, or federal responses to climate change. But it's very much on our radar. I can't give you any specifics right now as to how we are filtering things that way, but it is part of every discussion.
I guess I would say that you know, we have done quite a bit in certain respects. Just looking at agricultural properties where typically we have just purchased conservation easements. Well, there are lots of cases now where even though there's a conservation easement on a property, when it's going to be sold, a farmer can't afford to purchase it. So it's going to go into more of an estate than remain a farm. And we've made the decision to hang on to some of those properties, most notably Coffelt Farm, which has not been an easy thing to do, quite honestly, but it's certainly been effective. You know, Coffelt Farm was basically on a course where the Coffelts were retiring and they were going to have to sell the property, and it was likely going to be divided into 5 distinct properties, and probably there would be no farm if we hadn't actually purchased it. And so it remains intact, and it remains producing food to this day, as do our other properties, which we lease out for agriculture. And with our conservation easements, which were originally really oriented toward aesthetics, we've definitely taken a hard look at that to make sure that farmers are able to utilize those properties to produce food. Sometimes there's a conflict that what you do as a farmer is not attractive to someone driving by on a road, but we've worked pretty hard to try and strike that balance so that we can keep those farms going over time.
I just wanted to add, Steve, is that I think the idea of solar arrays, while it doesn't fit with preserving land, that still maybe there is some opportunity for both to happen. Our current conservation easements don't allow that. But in a long-term view, perhaps the land bank could take an expanded role in that. It would have to be part of something else. It's not really in our mandate, but it has been, at least on my mind, but I think it can come into conflict with the core conservation values that we're mandated to protect. So it would need to be, I think, kind of an expansion of our role and mandate. But I think there's potential there.
Anyone else on that one?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Steve if he can give us any specifics about how he thinks we ought to be doing things differently. I think I share Steve's concerns, and he's made them clear, and they resonate with me easily. But I'd like to know from Steve, is there something in particular that you would have us do, or things?
Appreciate that, David. I guess one of the reasons I'm concerned that mitigation, because we're such a small county and we're a small number of people, and we're actually pretty progressive in many ways, we're moving in good directions with mitigation of our CO2 output and our carbon footprints. There's a lot of work to do, but we're doing pretty well. What I'm most concerned with is adaptation to these cascading changes that are quickly coming our way. And I'm not speaking so much about sea level change, which over a long period will certainly be a concern. But I'm thinking of food production primarily and energy production. I think that carbon sequestration, whether it's planting more trees where trees will grow well and we don't have other use for those rather shallow soils or whatever for producing food. I think that trying to, where you have farming leases or conservation easements, where we can try to force the issue a little bit about trying to build those soils to be more productive and therefore sequester more carbon, as well as produce better hay, silage, crops, gardens, whatever. I think that's all really important. And I think that, of course, you're in the business of water management. And I certainly hope that Zylstra Lake will continue to become a place where the water rights that are so important there are held firmly by the county and the land bank. I also see that there's a possibility of mixing agriculture with solar arrays, where I see that in some places you can have sheep feeding, under spaced solar arrays, and those kinds of things are a big possibility. So, it's a lot. It's like a lot of little solutions that need a land base. Mm-hmm. And the county has some properties and a lot of ideas, and there's a lot of change going on in the comp plan right now, as you know well, for 2036. And I feel so good about the land bank and so good about the kinds of places that can be acquired. I'm just trying to think about how that can create a more sustainable, resilient future for this community and this county. And I think land use is going to have to turn a little bit away from aesthetics, as Lincoln mentioned, away from aesthetics, away from trails being a primary thing, view sheds or whatever, and maybe toward, some grim realities of producing energy, producing protein, producing crops. And so, David, I don't know, you certainly might have a few more ideas, but that's kind of the end of it right now for me. I mean, I don't have that much.
Well, I think that you're pointing to something that is coming our way, which is that we're going to have to reckon our need for electricity, which is going to really accelerate a lot as people start driving more electric cars. I mean, Opalco is scrambling to figure out how they're going to provide the power that people here are going to want to use. But we value open space and we value views, and we're going to have to start to decide, do we accept the infrastructure that energy production requires in our in our neighborhoods. I recently drove up from southern Utah to Washington through Nevada and Oregon, and there is an impressive amount of solar and wind the whole way. But here in this county at this point, we don't have to look at that stuff very much. And I think that we're going to be forced into a position at some point where we have to look at that a lot harder. And it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult for this body, I think.
Steve, one thing with the comp plan, from what I understand, is that so Opalco does want to look at areas where they can put larger arrays. That typically seems to fall within agricultural areas that are sunny and accessible. And currently the solar arrays aren't permitted there. I think that's something the Planning Commission has talked about, but so that could be something that you may want to check in about, is where are solar arrays allowed or where aren't they allowed, that perhaps should be changed in the code.
There's going to be a solar array on the corner of Baylor Hill Road and Douglas Road, which I'll be able to see out the kitchen window from our house. And I think that when that pops up, there's going to be quite a bit of consternation in this community from folks who didn't know that it was coming. It's in a spot that used to have cattle grazing. It's not a meadow. It's got sort of rocky features, but it's going to cause a lot of conversation when they start building that.
I've also heard some tentative plans for private landowners who have farmland that are considering some solar arrays. I know of a few that already exist on large arrays on buildings, but nothing on farmland. But I know the conversation is happening. So I think it's something we're going to be seeing more of.
That's a great discussion. I'd like to close out that conservation easement question. One of the comments about that second part was conservation easements could help with connectivity and habitat restoration, which I know has been brought up before, but the other part of that conservation easement question, excuse me, was more about, I think it was maybe cooperation between the two parties, supplemented by educational opportunities for ecological land management practices for restoration, as an example, demonstrated on a property that is owned by the land bank. So conservation easements would be more effective with a mutual understanding of conservation fostered by hands-on educational opportunities, right? And I have to say, between looking at the hands and the box, I'm not sure if all of that got answered earlier. So I apologize if that's a repeat, but I just wanted to be able to close out the full question.
Was there a question there, or is that's a statement?
I think it was more of a question about the conservation easements, if there's been some troubles between the two, if there was a way to work together with educational or maybe, and I'm not sure if that's meant to be educating the property owner or working. So I know, Kathy, if you want to ask that one live or help me out with explaining it better, your intention.
I would say off the bat that, when we do conservation easements, one of the first things we encourage the property owner to do is to talk to the conservation district, which does farm plans and natural resource management plans, so that they can get a better understanding of things that they can do to manage their property more sustainably, in a more ecologically friendly manner, and protect those resources. So.
Okay. Kathy, would you mind asking it live? Thank you.
Sure, I'll just read it as I wrote it. I said, perhaps enforce is the wrong word. Maybe cooperation between the two parties supplemented by educational opportunities for ecological land management practices for restoration, for example, demonstrated on a property that is owned by the land bank. Maybe conservation easements would be more effective with a mutual understanding of conservation fostered by hands-on educational opportunities. And then I said, what do you think? And I guess having worked with the conservation district and WSU, speaking about like soil biology and carbon sequestration, these are not things that you learn about working with WSU. You know, they call it trendy. And the conservation district is it's not hands-on, it's very isolated. And so my thought has always been like, could there be a place on a preserve that we could learn about rewilding and things like that? Different ways to enhance soil and see results, such as the Marin Carbon Project down in Point Reyes. You know, just different things like that, that you own property. So could it be help supplement your conservation easements and as a way to get education into the fold? What do you guys think?
Thank you for explaining that. That was much better than the question.
Yeah.
I love that idea. And I think it would help not just conservation easement holders, but any landowner. I'm interested to see what happens with the turtleback forest management, the smaller scale one, and had suggested maybe that someone could give a little, explanation. So it's not just there, but maybe there's a forest person that could, not a class, but a walkthrough and an explanation. And I think that our staff and our stewards have that knowledge, but I also think that I don't feel that we could put anything more on their plate. I think they're just accomplishing a lot, but perhaps we could bring in outside people, for example, whoever's doing the forestry work. I'm drawing a blank there, but maybe
Carson Springer.
Right. You know, perhaps there could be an outside person that we coordinate with to do an educational something.
Sandy, I have done that on a property that I manage that is under conservation easement with the San Juan Preservation Trust, where I had or Carson came with a couple of his crew, and we did an educational project with regards to biochar, and that worked out really well. And I think that there are numerous opportunities for that kind of thing on land that has conservation easements on it, whether it's through us or through the trust.
But I think that Sandy is raising a good point, which is what is our excess capacity as an organization?
Well, exactly. But in this case, it didn't require any staff. You know, I was there as the land manager for that private client, and you know, did it directly with Carson. So I don't think it necessarily has to have a staff component.
Well, we do have the land, we have land, and we, you know, continuing under the theme of partnering. If there are other organizations that have the capacity to provide that educational opportunity, we could partner with someone to use the land, one of the parcels or something that we own. So I think there, you know, it's kind of creates an interesting opportunity. And I'm all about partnerships and not taking on things that kind of fall outside of our direct area of focus, but we can certainly supplement and partner with people that do have the expertise to do that. And I'm going to I hesitate to say this right now, but I'm just going to say, because this isn't really a commission meeting, this is a conversation with the community, that I think it would be important that people who are listening and to the comments that are being made, that they're being offered by commissioners as individuals. And no one here currently is speaking on behalf of the commission, because we're not in a commission meeting and we're not deliberating on any particular topics. But I'm hearing things being said by different commissioners that are interesting to hear, but I think people should just not leave this meeting thinking that whatever, we're going to put up a huge solar array on Turtleback.
That's right. That was me speaking as an individual thinking forward. So thanks for clarifying that.
Which we all
Good
are,
stuff.
and that's why people are here to ask the questions. I think it's fair. I'm not saying, yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
That's a good point. The next question in our line here is the land bank open to fundraising from the public?
We do kind of fundraise for the public sometimes, I think. I don't have that much experience, but I will say this. I know we fundraise for Channel Preserve, and we didn't actually get involved too directly with Top of the World, but we encouraged those people to go out to get a gauge of what the community was willing to, how committed they were to parcels. So personally speaking, as an individual, I'm not super supportive of doing a lot of fundraising through the land bank, because we are a government entity and we get tax dollars to do our work. But I think using fundraising as a gauge of interest and commitment is a good idea. That's what I would say.
Does anybody else want to weigh in?
I would say, traditionally we've stayed away from private fundraising and partnered with organizations to do that, in particular the Preservation Trust, and that's been a very effective partnership. Having said that, whatever we need to do to conserve land, we will do. So just give me a call.
Well, and there's another question from someone else who kind of follows right on there. So I'm going to go with that one, which is, will the sources for state and federal grants continue to provide opportunities for the Conservation Land Bank?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there have been some new avenues open, particularly at the federal level with the permanent authorization and funding of the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which spends 900 million or generates 900 million a year. That's nationwide, but and typically, mostly that's going to go to federal agencies, but we've got a number of them here who manage land and are eligible to apply for those funds. That's in fact what we're contemplating with the Bureau of Land Management at Watmow. But we've done that in the past, worked with the National Park Service on Mitchell Hill, and we'll continue to do that. And we've certainly applied and successfully applied for federal grant funds for endangered species conservation, for coastal wetlands conservation, and the state grants. We absolutely will remain heavily invested in trying to get some of those state funds for conservation projects. That all does marry again to private conservation, where an organization like the Preservation Trust is going to be eligible to get grants from foundations and certainly pulling in private money. So that whole public-private partnership is really pretty critical.
Let's see. There's a question going back to the road end topic. It seems road ends may provide access to significant public tidelands and shouldn't be viewed as just a 40-foot lot. Also, we need to ensure that they don't fall in a gap where neither Public Works nor any other entity works to maximize the public benefit of those sites. I guess maybe that's more of a comment than a question. I don't know if anybody has any comments on that.
I was thinking when the ROTMs came up the first time that it would be appropriate to bring into the Parks, Trails, and Natural Areas plan on the next round, which I believe is 2022 to 26 or 8. Because that includes Public Works, County Parks, and the Land Bank.
Right, similarly to roadside trails and alternate transportation, non-motorized transportation. Definitely very interested in working with parks and Public Works on those kinds of issues too.
Well, we have a comment for Jim's example of education regarding biochar. The land bank could help facilitate educational opportunities even when the project is a non-land bank land. There's a comment. And the next question is, or maybe it's a comment, sorry. An educational component is important and there are likely partnerships possible. Funding can follow. There are naturalists, beach watchers, locally trained, and pilot with volunteers, then see, pilot with volunteers, then seek funding. Awareness builds caring. So it's a comment. I didn't read it before I read it. So thanks for the good comments. And then a question of, has the land bank ever thought about transferring ownership of recreational land to Parks and Rec?
Well, it's something that we do talk about from time to time. We've tried to maintain kind of a distinct presence from being a park, in that we are much more focused on natural areas and typically have less infrastructure, and we're about conservation of the resource first and foremost. Whereas parks have a much stronger recreational component. However, we have properties like something along the lines of Mount Grant, where it's something new. When we acquired that, we've never acquired a property with a road that goes to the top. In almost all other cases, people come to a land bank property and they park their car or maybe their bicycle and walk onto the property, or maybe bike onto the property. But having a road access was something quite different, and in bringing us closer to that park category. I still think there's a big difference, though. We are certainly open to partnering with parks, and there may be projects where part of the acquisition is something that's much more of a recreational project than a conservation project, and it would make perfect sense for parks to manage something like that in concert with the land bank managing the more natural area. But we're happy to talk about all that kind of stuff.
I would add on to that too, of some examples where we've come in and been able to help conserve spaces like East Sound Waterfront Park. I believe that park, actually, there's only one lot out of 4 or 5 that ended up coming up for sale over time. But just one lot of those is actually county parks, and the rest of the land bank has been able to protect and conserve. And through that partnership with county parks, we've actually been able to leverage more oversight, more funding, more care for those facilities. So these partnerships run really, really deep. Another really great example of that is Watma Bay, where you have the national monument there, as well as the land bank. And it's been a really amazing partnership there, both with the staff, the volunteers, and having this federal agency that's sort of charged with conservation at a different level is fantastic. And then having our presence there, in addition to that, provides some nimbleness to be able to address some local concerns and issues that the feds just don't have. So while on the outset you could say, gosh, why don't you just transfer that property? In the end, it really serves the community so much better to have our presence there and helping guide and take care of those places at the time.
Hey, well, I have a comment. This is going back to the questions about education and the role of the land bank in both environmental education and linking that to stewardship and conservation on these lands. I think it's a great idea that the land bank has a lot of resources, knowledgeable staff that would be available to share that information if they didn't have their already current load of work. Like for an example, Amanda and I had talked for a minute about doing a citizen science project on Lopez with amphibian surveys on land bank properties. And that would have been a good way to both educate people about it, but also get people onto land bank land, get them familiar with it and start caring about it. So I really think that education and outreach is a really important part of conservation. It's more of a question of whether the land bank has that capacity to do it on its own. Like if I'm not proposing we do this, but if there was a dedicated not outreach, but like educator who would run these kinds of programs as staff, or if it's going to be done through like Tom's suggestion of facilitating programs, even if like a biochar program or something that even if it's not on the land. I think, again, we have a lot of resources with our staff and knowledge with our staff, but whether or not that's a role that the land bank is going to play in the islands versus another organization that might be better equipped to do that because education is their primary focus, I'm not sure. But I really do think there's a lot of value in our capacity, and if we were able to expand our capacity to do that, I think that would bring a lot of value to what we already are doing.
Thanks. So I don't have anything queued up from the participants. Are there any last questions that people would like to put out there? We still have a half an hour booked for the event. Where does everyone go? Hand raised. Well, big thanks to all from Mr. Reeve. Thanks, Tom. I don't want to cut anyone off, but while I still have everybody, I will put a plug out there. I've got a survey, so when the event does end, you should be prompted to answer it. I swear it's short. It's only 5 questions. I think 3 of which are multiple choice. 2, you can provide your own answer, but I would greatly appreciate anyone that attended to answer that. It would really be helpful for me for future planning. I'm learning as we go. Another thank you. Thank you all for your time. And then a question, can you talk about your experience of the comp plan? Does anyone have experience with the comp plan that they could share?
It's been long.
That might be a whole nother meeting.
Yeah, but
And it goes
on.
on.
I was kind of hoping that those maps that Lincoln put up when he shared his screen in his presentation, and maybe they're already there, but if they're not, are those maps something that we could share on our website, perhaps, for people to take a closer look at them? From my screen, they were a little small and hard to really wrap my head around, but I've seen them before. But if they can be added to our website for people to take a look at, and it looks like we just had a member of the public say yes, maps. So
I think we're going to attach the link to that presentation when isn't that going out with the survey, so people who are on this call will actually get a copy of that. Is that right, Tanya?
Yeah, Not directly after, not tomorrow, but yes, I have everyone that was on the, and if I can get it posted to the website, I'll have a link up so that it's something that can live there for folks if they want to take a look at that. The answer is yes, but I don't know the logistics yet.
Yeah, I think that Jim just made a very good point about the comp plan. We should share those maps because they're very critical. But for anybody who wants to look independently, those maps are part of the DCD's land capacity analysis. And what they show, the areas in various shades of green, are lands that are presently developed or not developed, but which have more development capacity. And some lands, large subdivided lands, which could be further subdivided. In other words, more houses, more population. Some lands are very worthwhile. And we had a discussion about that early on when those lands, or when those maps first appeared in the land capacity analysis, and realized that some of those lands are really target areas for the land bank, target areas for conservation. So I would suggest that people take a good look at those maps, because whether they're developed and where they're developed or not is really the future of this county.
There is a question about, did the land bank comment on the comp plan? And can you share the link if so? And I don't.
We have talked to DCD staff directly, although frankly, there's been so much turnover there that it's kind of hard to keep track. So we haven't made any official comments that we could link, but we have talked to them a fair amount.
And I have a comment that there are lots of great films offered at the COP26 conference on climate change. So not sure if Steve's still on the call, but he might be interested in that. Thanks for that comment, that share. Anyone else out there in the attendee world? Or any last comments from staff or commissioners? Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you to all the attendees from the public and for their great questions. And I think this is a fabulous way to go about this. Certainly be easier to do, and I mean, I guess it would be more fun to do in public, but I think this is pretty good because we can all do it from our desks at home. And I really appreciate the engaged public.
Oh, I got another pop up. Oh, I think that's a comment for me to email someone. Okay, well, we finished in less than two hours. And if anyone's still on the call, the next monthly commission meeting is the 19th, I believe. Yeah. So about a week and a half if you want to Zoom with us again. That one's an easy one. All right, I guess that's it.
Just say that as commissioner, it's much more fun for me to meet with you all and talk with you all in person, and I'm missing it. So I hope that the next time that we do this, it will be in person. And thank you all for coming.
And thank you, Tanya, for getting this all set up and running it so smoothly.
Well, that might be questionable, but
That was good. No, you did great.
Yep.
getting better
Well,
every time. Thanks for sticking
job.
with me.
Good job, Tanya.
All right, see you all next time. Thanks attendees. I'm gonna end the meeting now and I guess stop recording.
All right. See ya. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Night, everybody.
So
Okay.
everybody.